The first warning came as a whisper in the radio. On the cold edge of galactic space, the station called Epsilon Ridge floated like a broken bead on a dark string. It was a listening post, not a fortress. It had thin walls, old guns, and tired crew. Inside the cum room, Officer Lyra Van stared at a screen that kept blinking red. Signal spike, she said, voice tight. Unknown source deep ranged. Wideband burst. Commander Rosk, a tall Drakehind with ash-gray scales and a scar across his snout, leaned closer. Played. Lyra tapped the panel. Static filled the room, then a voice not spoken, but translated. The words were sharp and strange, like a language pulled out of a museum. This is a request for aid. This is a plea. We are under attack. The translation hesitated, then forced the next line into shape, calling, humanity. The room went quiet. Eyes narrowed. That word again. Lyra swallowed. It's in the old archive as species. From the Sol system. Humans. Rosk clicked his claws against the floor, a nervous habit. Humans don't answer calls. Humans don't even pick up council messages. Humans don't. Another burst hit the speakers. The voice returned, louder now, like it was shouting through smoke. We have made a terrible error. Our children are dying. Our shields are failing. Please, whoever you are, help. A third line followed, short final. We do not know who else to call. Lyra looked at Rosk. Commander, should we forward it? Rosk stared at the word on the screen. Humanity. In the Drakehind schools, hatchlings learned old stories. Some were myths. Some were warnings. Humans were always in the warning section. Humans had fought wars that lasted for generations. Humans had built ships with engines meant to survive broken space. Humans had sent probes into stars like curious knives. And humans, the legend said, did not like bullies. Rosk drew a slow breath. Forwarded. Full packet. All data. Sent to the council. Lyra's claws hovered over the keys. And if the council blocks it, Rosk's voice dropped. Then send it anyway. Direct on every channel that can reach Sol. Lyra nodded, and her fingers moved. The distress call left Epsilon Ridge and raced across the dark, bouncing off relays, slipping through old routes, digging for any ear that might still be listening. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the station lights flickered. The comm screen changed. A new signal appeared so clean it looked unreal. It was coming from far away from Sol. Lyra's mouth went dry. Commander, we got a reply. Rosk leaned in, scales tight. Already the message was short. No greeting, no title, no council stamp. Just 5 words, translated with no hesitation at all. We heard you. Hold on. Far away, in a system lit by a yellow star. The reply had been sent from a room filled with humans. Admiral Naomi Cross stood in front of a wall of screens. Her hair was tied back, her face calm in a way that made people nervous. Around her, officers spoke in clipped voices. Origin confirmed, said Commander Jackson Reed. Galactic relay. Outer sector. They used an ancient emergency code. Cross folded her arms. Show me the call. The room played the message. The line calling. Humanity echoed again. Some officers traded looks. One of them, a young woman with a tablet in hand, cleared her throat. Admiral, could be a trap. Or a misunderstanding. The council has tried to pull us back into their politics. Before. Cross did not answer right away. She stared at the last line. We do not know who else to call. Jackson watched her closely. He had served under her for 6 years. He knew that look. It was not anger. It was a decision. Cross finally spoke. They didn't call the council. They didn't call mercenaries. They didn't call their neighbors. She pointed at the screen. They called us. The young officer frowned. But why would they call humanity? That's not a fleet name. Jackson tapped his tablet and pulled up an old file. It used to be. Long story. He glanced at Cross. She gave a small nod. Jackson spoke to the room. 200 years ago, the Sol system formed a rescue group for outer colonies. It was called the Humanity Response Fleet. People used the word humanity like a badge, like a promise. He paused. The group ended after the council tried to control it, but the name stayed in old records. A senior captain scoffed. Saw some alien, panicked and clicked the wrong label. Cross's eyes sharpened and it reached the right one. The captain opened his mouth, then closed. Cross turned to the fleet status board. How fast can we move? Fast, Jackson repeated. We can send a task force in 12 hours. Full fleet in. Cross cut him off. Not 12. She looked around the room. This is a distress call. Civilians, Jordan said. Children, her voice stayed even, but the air in the room changed. Wake the carrier, she said. Launch the hospital ships. And yes, bring Teats. A few officers blinked. Admiral Teats cross-pointed at the map. If they're calling for help, something big is chewing on them. She leaned closer to the screen, like she could stare through the stars. Humans don't answer council messages, she said softly. But we answer screams. Jackson felt his chest tighten. He knew what was coming. Cross straightened, send the reply. Jackson nodded. He typed it himself. We heard you, hold on. Then Cross added one more line. Not for the aliens. For her own people. Open the fleet channel. She ordered all hands. Seconds later, every ship in Sol space received her voice. This is Admiral Naomi Cross, she said. Outer sector distress call. Unknown hostile Seviers in danger. Her pause was small but heavy. Would deploy in 1 hour. And across the system, Meta woke up. Asterisk back at Epsilon Ridge. Commander Rosk watched the response like it was a ghost. 1 hour after the reply, more messages came. Not from the Council. From Sol. From human ships. Their transmissions were strange. They were polite, but direct. They asked for coordinates, enemy descriptions, civilian population estimates. They also asked something that made Rosk's throat tighten. Is evacuation possible? Rosk sent what he had. He sent everything. But the real fight was not at Epsilon Ridge. The real fight was at a world called KHAROS 3 jumps away. KHAROS was Drake-kind territory. A rocky planet with wide deserts and cliff cities carved into black stone. Families lived there for centuries. Hatchlings learned to climb before they learned to read. Now the sky over KHAROS burned a swarm of ships, black and sharp as broken glass, pressed against the planet's defense line. They did not send demands. They did not send warnings. They simply arrived, and they started to harvest. The attackers were known only as the Null Hive. They were not true machines, not true living creatures. They were something in between. Their ships moved like insects. Their weapons cut like cold light. On the surface, Governor Serata Drake-kind leader with gold rings on his horn stood on a balcony and watched his city shake. Shields at 27%, a guard reported. The Western Dome has failed. Civilians are moving to the cliff tunnels. Serat's claws clenched. And the fleet, the guard's eyes dropped. Our fleet is broken. Governor, 4 ships left in orbit. 2 are damaged. The Council is not coming. Serat jaw tightened. They said they would send help. They said they were considering it. The guard's voice cracked. They said the sector's too far. Another boom rolled across the city. Somewhere below, stone dust rose like smoke. Serat looked toward the Com Tower on the far ridge. That tower was sending the distress call over and over, calling a name pulled from ancient data, calling a species that did not answer. Serat whispered, almost like a prayer. Please. The next day, the planet's outer shield collapsed. The Null Hive ships punched through the defense line. Their beams carved holes into orbital platforms. Debris rained down like hot hail. On the ground, Serat moved through a tunnel filled with frightened families. Hatchlings clung to parents. Old veterans leaned on canes. Medics carried packs of supplies that were already running out. A small Drake-kind child looked up at Serat and asked, Governor, are we going to die? Serat froze. Leaders were trained to speak, trained to inspire, trained to lie with a calm face. But in that moment, with the ground shaking and the air full of dust, Serat could not find a clean lie. Then a soldier ran in, panting. Governor, signal incoming, new ships entering the system. Serat turned. So fast, his rings clinked. Council. The soldier shook his head, eyes wide. No, unknown. But the transponder code is not Council. Serat's heart hammered. Show me. They reached a command chamber built into the cliff. Screens flickered to life, showing the system, map, and there, like a tear in reality space bent, a jump gate opened that was not a Council gate. It was bright, wide, and stable, like a door held open by sheer force. Ships poured through. Not 4, not 10. A fleet. Big carriers with wide flat decks, cruisers with thick armor, long ships that looked like spears. Small, fast craft swarming around them like angry bees. On every hull, in clean, simple marks, was the same symbol. A circle, a line, a star, and a word in human letters. Sol. The command chamber fell silent. A Drake-kind officer whispered, They came. Serat's throat went tight. Humans. Another screen popped up. A human face appeared. A woman with tired eyes. Sharp, posture, and a voice that did not shake. "This is Admiral Naomi Krause of the Seoul Defense Fleet," she said. "We received your call." Surratt stepped closer, almost afraid the image would vanish. Cross continued, "We are in system. We see hostile craft. We see civilian structures under fire." Her eyes flicked as if she was reading data faster than any Drake-kind mind could. "Governor Surratt," she said, and the translator said his name perfectly, "do you grant Seoul Fleet permission to engage in your behalf?" Surratt's voice came out rough. "Yes." Cross nodded once. "Then get your people underground," Surratt blinked. "Underground." Cross's mouth tightened into something almost like a smile. "This part gets loud." The humans did not start with a speech. They started with movement. Their ship spread out in a wide arc, like a wall forming in silence. Smaller craft launched from carriers in waves, darting ahead to mark targets. The Null Hive turned toward the newcomers like a predator, noticing new meat. Black ships swarmed forward. Then the human fleet spoke in fire. Human weapons were not delicate. They were not pretty. Rail cannons slammed metal into space at speeds that made the screens stutter. Missiles broke into clusters, each one chasing heat like a hungry dog. Laser nets flashed, not as thin beams but as wide sheets, cutting swarms apart. The first Null Hive ship hit a human barrier, field and shattered like glass. Another tried to slip around the flank. A human frigate rotated, engines screaming, and rammed at Rosk. Watching from Epsilon Ridge through a live relay, felt cold crawl through his spine. Humans were not just fighting, they were hunting. Cross's voice stayed calm on the command. "Trying to keep them away from the planet. Protect the cliff cities. Do not let them breach the tunnels." Jackson Reed's voice answered, fast and sharp. "Strug Group 2, you're drifting. Pull back. Medships behind the line. No hero runs." A young pilot's voice cut in, excited and scared at the same time. "Ma'am, they're everywhere," Cross replied. "Good, then we won't miss." The Null Hive adjusted. Their ships moved into tight shapes, like a school of fish turning. Together, they fired beams that made human shields flare white. A human cruiser took a direct hit and rocked. Surratt sucked in a breath. "They'll break," but the cruiser did not break. It fired back. And then something else happened, something no one expected. 3 human ships moved forward, but not to shoot. They opened their sides. Bright light spilled out. Dozens of pods, launched evac pods, medical pods, rescue pods heading straight toward. KHAROS, Surratt's officer shouted. "They're sending craft to the surface during the battle." Surratt stared. "Why?" The answer came from the human comm channel, half cut by noise. "Civilian corridors open," Jackson said. "Drop teams go now. We don't wait for safe." Surratt's claws trembled. "They're coming for the people," a soldier beside him whispered, almost in disbelief. "They're risking ships for strangers." Surratt watched the pods streak through fire like falling stars. End for the first time in days. Hope hit him hard enough to hurt on the ground. The tunnels shook as the battle raged above in a main shelter chamber. Families huddled under emergency lights. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and fear. Then a deep thump echoed through the stone. A hatchling screamed. A mother pulled the child close, and then a door unsealed for generations began to open. Guards raised weapons, readied for monsters. But the first figure through the doorway was not a Null Hive drone. That was a human. He was tall and broad, wearing heavy armor marked with a red cross in the soul star. His helmet came off, and his face was pale, streaked with grime. He raised both hands, palms out. "Easy," he said in slow basic trade speech. "We're here to help." Behind him came more humans. Some carried medical packs. Some carried boxes of water and food. Some carried stretchers, and then something else stepped through. It was Drakehind, but not like the people of KHAROS. Its scales were dark and smooth. Its eyes were bright like polished amber. It wore a human harness with small tools clipped to it. A murmur ran through the shelter. A Drakehind elder stared. "That is a ski Drake." The human medic glanced at the creature and patted its neck like it was a dog. "This is Ember. She likes kids. Try not to feed her metal." The elder blinked. "You brought a dragon." The human smiled, tired but warm. "We didn't bring her, she brought herself. Long story." A hatchling, braver than the rest, stepped forward. "Are you humanity?" The human's face softened. He crouched to eye level. "Yeah," he said. "That's us." The hatchling asked, "Are you angry?" The human paused. "Angry." The hatchling pointed upward. At the bad ships. The human looked toward the stone ceiling, as if he could see the war through it. Then he nodded. "Yes, we are." stood and waved his team forward. "Alright, medline here. Food there. Anyone hurt? Come now. We've got you." The simple words hit the shelter like warmth. People began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, like a frozen crowd waking up in orbit. Then Null Hive realized something important. The humans were not trying to win a clean battle, they were trying to save lives during the battle. So the Hive changed tactics. A cluster of black ships broke away and dove toward the planet, aiming for the Cliff City's main tunnel mouths. Surat's command crew shouted warnings. Cross's voice snapped over. "The tunnel they're going for, civilians intercept." Now a human destroyer surged forward. It was smaller than the Hive cluster. It should have been outmatched, but it did not slow down. "Admiral," the destroyer captain said, "permission to burn hard." Cross answered instantly. "Granted." The destroyer's engines flared so bright the cameras dimmed and accelerated, like it wanted to tear itself apart. Then it did something that made every Drakehind officer gasp. It placed itself between the Hive ships and the planet, a living shield. The Hive fired. Beams tore into the destroyer's hull. Armor peeled away. Flames burst from vents. The ship kept moving. It fired missiles point blank into the swarm, shredding to Hivecraft. Another Hivecraft swung around, trying to slip past. The human destroyer rolled and rammed it again, metal screaming. Both ships spinning away. Surat's claws dug into his palm. "They're sacrificing themselves." Cross's voice cut through, hard but controlled. "Rescue ships, lock onto the destroyer's beacon. Pull survivors now." Jackson Reed answered, "Already on it." Even in the middle of hell, the humans were planning the saving part. The Hive cluster faltered, and in that pause, the rest of the Soul Fleet struck like a hammer. A wave of human bombers dove in and released heavy payloads that burst into bright nets of light. The nets wrapped Hive ships and crushed them inward, like invisible hands. The swarm broke. The Hive tried to retreat. Cross did not let them. "Do not chase into deep space." She ordered. "Box them. Cut her exits." Human ships moved into a closing ring. The Hive screamed in signals that made the translator glitch. For the first time, the Null Hive looked afraid. Then one last Hive vessel tried something desperate. It aimed straight at KHAROS. It powered its core like a bomb. Saw it on the screen and felt his blood turn to ice. "It's going to crash." Cross's eyes narrowed. "All guns now." Every human ship that could fire fired. The Hive vessel was hit by so much force that it stopped being a ship. It became a cloud, a bright, silent bloom of debris that never reached the atmosphere. The system went quiet except for human comm chatter and emergency signals. A long moment passed. Then Cross spoke, voice lower. "Hostiles neutralized." Surat stared at the screen as if he could not trust it. A Drakehind officer whispered, "It's over." Surat's legs nearly gave out. He keyed the comm. "Admiral Kraus." Kraus looked back at him. Governor Surat's voice shook. "Why did you come?" Cross blinked once, as if the question was strange. "Because you asked," she said. "Because someone out there was desperate enough to say please." Surat swallowed. "We may have called you by mistake." Cross's expression did not change. "Doesn't matter," she said. "Wrong number, right answer." Hours later in the cliff shelter, Surat walked among his people again. They were eating, drinking clean water, getting treated by human medics. Hatchlings were laughing softly at first, then louder as Ember the Skydrek. Let them touch her. Scales, a human engineer, sat with Drakehind miners, already talking about rebuilding the shield grid. Surat found the first human medic, the tall one who had entered with hands raised. "You saved them," Surat said. The medic shook his head. "We helped you held out." Surat looked at the human's tired eyes. "We feared you." The human gave a small shrug. "That's normal." Surat hesitated. "In our stories, humans are dangerous." The human smiled without humor. "Yeah, we can be." He glanced toward the hatchlings. "But we try to aim that danger at the right thing." Surat felt something heavy in his chest loosen. He looked down the tunnel where the human teams moved like a practice storm, fast, loud, but careful with the fragile parts. And he understood the truth that the old records never explained. Humans were not quiet because they were weak. Humans were quiet because they were choosing. They were waiting until a call mattered. Enough to answer. Surat turned back toward the comm tower, where the distress call had started. One wrong word, one old label, one desperate mistake, and a fleet had arrived. Surat bowed his head, not in shame, but in deep respect. "Thank you," he said. The human medic nodded once. like the words were accepted and stored. Then from the tunnel mouth, a new message came in on Surat's command device. It was from Admiral O'Cross. "We are staying until you are safe. Then we'll teach you how to give out." Surat read it twice. Outside, the sky over KHAROS was still scarred by battle, but it was no longer falling. For the first time in many days, the planet felt like it could breathe, and somewhere far away, across relay lines in dark space, the name humanity stopped being a warning in old files. It became something else, a promise that, if you were desperate enough to call, someone would come, even if you dialed the wrong number.